This is a Sega Dreamcast, but not like one you're used to. And no, I'm not talking about the awesome neon green clear shell. I'm talking about what's going on inside of this thing. So if you are a retro fan or loved the Sega Dreamcast as much as I did, buckle up because I am going to show you the ultimate Sega Dreamcast mod and why you should be on the lookout for a broken one cheap. You are going to love what's going on inside of this Dreamcast. Ah, the Dreamcast, the last dying breath of Sega in the console market. Released September 9th, 1999, and discontinued January 31st, 2001, with a total of 619 games released. And if you were a fan of the Sega Dreamcast, then you already know there was quite a few fantastic games released in that library. And Dreamcast is one of those consoles that it's not completely out of the question to collect every single game with there only being 619. It sounds like a lot, but in comparison to other consoles, it's not very many. But what if you could have an original Sega Dreamcast that contained every single one of those releases? So fun little story about this Dreamcast. This is actually my launch Dreamcast. And as you saw in the beginning of the video, it no longer has a disk drive. The optical drive has been removed. Why is that? Well, because unfortunately on this Dreamcast, it stopped working. But in this case, that's a very good thing because the optical disk drive has been replaced with a GDEMU optical disc emulator. I know that's a mouthful, but let me explain. This little piece of plastic here is actually an SD card reader. And on this SD card, I have all 619 games released for the Sega Dreamcast. And that's not only all the North American titles we got here, that's also a ton of the European or PAL titles that we didn't get, a handful of English translated Japanese games that we didn't get, and a collection of homebrew titles for the Sega Dreamcast that you have probably never played. Not to mention, it does have emulators like Nestor DC, which is an NES emulator, Super Nintendo, and most of the other emulators that have become commonplace with mods like this. It does also contain Codebreaker, which allows you to load game cheats right onto the SD card, in a similar fashion to something like the Game Shark. The games load really fast from the GDEMU menu, but I know what you're looking for. You want to see what it looks like in action. Well, let's check it out. I would like to point out that any Dreamcast can actually be hooked up to an HDMI TV. You can use something like this HDMI adapter. I prefer using the brand Level Hike because they're one of the only ones that I've tried that actually doesn't shoot power back into your console. I had my GameCube completely destroyed by one of these HDMI adapters that was doing that, so be careful. But for the case of this video, we have to hook it up to an old school CRT because that's just where it looks the best. So here we go. And there's your GD menu. This gives you every single Dreamcast game ever released. You still have complete functionality of your VMU. Check it out. Right now, it's actually even displaying the GD menu on the VMU. So anything you would want to play is going to be loaded up on here. Let's take a true Dreamcast classic for a ride.
Hey, come on over, have some fun with Crazy Taxi. Yeah. Crazy Taxi. Hey, it's time to make some crazy money. Are you ready? Here we go. Yeah. Hey, come here.
Good job. Listen to the cable car. I'm not
Here we go.
That hurt. Pay more attention.
So for me, this is just one of those consoles that gives me some incredibly heavy nostalgia. I'm sure it's because of the era of my life that it came out. But to have every single game ever released for this thing all loaded up in one place is just kind of a dream come true. I do want to say, like in all my other videos, I am through and through a games preservationist. If you have a working Dreamcast that does read discs and doesn't have any problems, I don't know that I would recommend doing this mod to that Dreamcast. But the good news is, on secondhand markets like eBay, Facebook, you can find these things broken and or not working for like really, really cheap. I'm talking 10, 20 bucks. Pick yourself up one like that, or like mine, and give it new life. I personally would much rather see a broken Dreamcast repurposed into something like this than just completely thrown out, which is what's happening to a lot of these things. Let me tell you folks, the more of these things that are thrown out, the more expensive these things are going to get. Salvage stuff like this. Don't let it get thrown away. Almost every single one of my mods that I have shown in these videos were salvage consoles that had some kind of problem to begin with. I do have a very, very large collection of physical media, and I have at least one, in some cases 5 or 6, consoles that are completely original, not modded, and in working order. So let's talk about level of difficulty for this mod. If we're looking at the Nintendo Wii mod and like the PlayStation Vita mod being all the way on the novice side, and something like the Xbox 360 or the Sega Saturn mod being all the way up at the top end of the difficulty scale, I would put this mod probably a little bit closer to the expert level mod. It does require quite a bit of teardown, and it does require soldering. And while I do recommend everyone attempt these mods themselves, that way you get to know the machine well, if it's something that you don't want to tackle, like always, Dr. Mod is who I have do all of my consoles. If you want to get a hold of him, his email is always in the description below. Now, quick disclaimer, these videos are never meant to teach you step by step how to do these mods. If that's what you're looking for, I'm sure there are plenty of places on the internet that you can find that sort of stuff. Now, where you decide to get your game backups or ROMs is totally up to you. These videos are meant purely to show you what can be done with a broken console and to express why salvaging consoles like this that are broken a really positive thing for game preservation. Now let me touch on that one more time. This is an original Dreamcast. This isn't some kind of Raspberry Pi in a 3D printed Dreamcast shell. I promise you, inside here is a real Dreamcast. The beauty of this mod is it's running on original hardware. This little setup in here is what's called an optical disc emulator. So this is emulating the disc, not emulating the console itself. The original Dreamcast is still doing all the game processing. So it's playing exactly as if you were to pop a disc in there. You just no longer have to take your disc off the shelf if you don't want to. And while I do like to play a lot of my physical copies of my games, because to be honest with you, I do think that's where a lot of the fun and nostalgia is, having something like this at your disposal where you don't have to go through all of your games to begin with, you can just plug it in and play whatever you want, is incredibly handy. And before you ask, yes, multi-disc games can still be played on these. All you have to do is open this up and press this little button when it asks you to change discs. And it changes discs for you. Kind of cool. Other than that, this thing runs exactly like a Dreamcast. All of your game saves are still going to be on your VMU or your memory card. So if you love the Dreamcast, I highly recommend going out and finding yourself one with a broken optical disc drive. They're actually really easy to find, and they're very, very cheap. Treat yourself. Order up this mod, install it, or, like I said, you can hit up Dr. Mod, and he can do it for you. Because let me tell you from experience, There is nothing like having one of your favorite video game consoles preloaded with every single game from the library. It's fantastic. If you like stuff like this, you should check out the PlayStation 3 mod right here, which is absolutely fantastic. And if you don't want to miss videos like this in the future, make sure you follow along, subscribe right here. And until next time, enjoy the journey.